Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the Pitchside podcast. I'm your host, the HOD of the PSP. As usual, like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're on 1.5k subscribers. We're heading towards the 2,000 mark. Hopefully we get that pretty soon. Follow us on social media and of course listen on any podcast listening platform of your choosing. Welcome to episode 48. Before we kick things off properly, of course, in the weekend preview episode here, let's start by congratulating both Eintracht Frankfurt and Rangers on reaching the Europa League final. Of course, West Ham couldn't make it out of the Frankfurt Stadium. They were a man down early on in the game, and they lost 1-0 thanks to the goal from Rafael Santos Borré in the 20th minute. Rangers, on the other hand, defeated Leipzig 3-1 to overcome the deficit from the first leg to qualify to the final. It won't be a German final as I wished for it. It will be Eintracht Frankfurt versus Rangers on the 25th of May. Let's get properly now to the Premier League preview, of course, and we get things off from England. Of course, it is the biggest and the hottest title race in Europe. There's more than one race going in the Premier League at the moment, really. There's the top of the table, of course, the title race. There's the top four, the battle between Spurs and Arsenal mainly, involving United and West Ham. You know, West Ham are really far at the moment. It's impossible that they will catch up, it seems. 11 points between them and Arsenal. It seems like they're destined for Conference League next season. There's, of course, the survival fight where Everton seem to be, pretty close to being relegated, although they have, of course, games in hand. They have 2 games in hand, Everton, in that race. So the fixture round 36 start on Saturday with Brentford facing Southampton. There's no early afternoon matches in this weekend. Burnley versus Aston Villa, of course. A game where Burnley, of course, will need the point at home, and they're on quite a good form, really. If you look at it, Burnley at the moment, they're winning games, they're getting crucial points. Brentford and Southampton, 2 sides that mostly guaranteed their sort of survival. It won't be exactly the most intensive game. Burnley, Aston Villa, on the other hand, is going to be pretty intense, particularly for Burnley, who will need every point that they can muster at the moment. Chelsea, safe season, I suppose you can say, for them now after exiting the Champions League. The title is not in their grasp, since Christmas period pretty much. And then you have, they only have the FA Cup to think about, so their season is, it's not exactly safe because Arsenal could still come back at them, and haunt them. There's one game in hand for everybody at the top of the table at the moment, it seemed, for Chelsea, of course, and Arsenal. They might end up 4th, who knows, somehow they might end up even 5th because Tottenham still have a couple of games in hand as well as everybody else on top, as I mentioned. And Chelsea at the moment, with all of the things ongoing behind the stage, the sort of sales pitch still going at the moment. Who's going to be owning the club? The takeover is still unfinished as far as Chelsea are concerned. Can they finish it, of course, before the 8th of June, which is the deadline given by the government? Because if they don't, apparently, according to certain reports, I don't know how credible they are, they're going to be banned and excluded from the Premier League if they don't finalise an ownership and a takeover deal before the 8th of June. I don't know how trustworthy, again, is that. But if that is true, that's going to be a big deal. Hopefully that's not true. Hopefully that is complete, and utter nonsense from fake pages or whatever. So as I mentioned, the game is important for Chelsea. Maybe the season is over for them, technically. They don't have only the FA Cup to play for, but I think a game against Wolves at home, they need to really reconciliate with the crowd. Their last couple of outings at home were not that great. They lost to Everton away. They drawn against Manchester United. I mean, they only have 1 win out of their last 5 5 league games. So it's definitely a time to reconciliate and finish the season on a high. And obviously there's certain changes expected for next season, when and if the takeover happens. Crystal Palace face Watford, of course, a game, with no stakes as well, one of those. Watford are already relegated. Crystal Palace are safe. There's no real rhyme or reason, I think, for any of these two teams to put any energy in this game. Brighton and Hove Albion face Manchester United. Manchester United will need every point that they can if they want to hold on to the smidget of hope that they have of getting into a top 4 finish. I mean, it's been a bad season. De Gea and Ronaldo have been the real standouts for Manchester United in a team full of bad performances defensively, in the midfield, in attack. Sancho didn't play the way people expected him to be for a €50 million signing. Varane was not good at the back. Maguire is still a curious case that people are still trying to understand and figure out at this day. The midfield is a big question mark for United. Bruno Fernandes is creative, but sometimes he just ghosts it, as Twitter says, in certain games and doesn't really perform. And that's not a slight against Bruno Fernandes as a player. He's a great player, but it's an absolute, I think, detriment to the organisation about him and around him in that midfield of Manchester United. That is really, really, really bad. The game is pretty tricky. They are going to Brighton, a side that is doing really, really well at the moment. They're 9th on the table. It's quite a high finish and a very respectable finish for Graham Potter. They could have finished higher, really, but they had that sort of patch. Just the last month and a half, where they lost a lot of games back to back, and they really couldn't, recover from that quickly. They did that in style, though, by defeating both North London sides, Arsenal and Spurs. Yes, they lost to City afterwards, but then they recovered as well. They beat Southampton, or they drawn against Southampton, and then they beat Wolves, who are right above them on the table, 3-0. Then, of course, comes the biggest game in the weekend, I think, Liverpool versus Tottenham Hotspur, and I'm going to really mesh it into one, talking about this game and the game between City and Newcastle, because they're pretty much in one context, which is a title race. Of course, different Champions League fates this midweek. Liverpool struggled but qualified. City had the game under control, but they bottled it in the end. Nothing can be said else other than they bottled it in the end. So how the mentality is going to be heading into this game, it's a question mark, big question mark. How it's going to be psychologically for Man City heading into this game against Newcastle on the back of that, not a bad performance, but it's a bad finish to the game. It's a horrendous finish to the game, where they completely collapsed and capitulated, and they gave Real Madrid the qualification. It was mistake after mistake after mistake, and missing chances, of course, in the end, which led to Real Madrid qualifying. Liverpool, on the other hand, they seem to be hitting a stride. They seem to be hitting a good wave of momentum. Yes, they struggled against Villarreal, but I think it was sort of their own doing in that first half. But in the second half, Klopp fixed things, and he made the changes needed. And Luis Diaz, oh boy, does he have some form on him at the moment. He's absolutely fantastic. He's getting into that team, and looks likely that he will be a starter in that final, ahead of Jota and ahead of Firmino, which is saying something, particularly for Jota, who's been terrific since he joined Liverpool. I mean, he hasn't dropped in form really, but Diaz just stepped it up as well. I mean, the whole of Liverpool offensive options are just great. And of course, they will be focused on these final few weeks of the league. They'll be focused on the FA Cup, and they will be focused on the Champions League final. Their game against Spurs, of course, a side that needs the points as well. They want to be in that top 4 race, so it's going to be quite intense. The first leg ended, or the first game between the two sides ended 2-2 in a draw that didn't seem like much. I mean, a draw where probably Spurs should have gotten better out of the game in that first leg, particularly with the red card to Robertson in that game. So it looked like Tottenham maybe missed 3 points in that game. So we'll see what they'll do here. Liverpool are not exactly infallible, but also, they're really, really strong side. They have a pretty deep squad at the moment, and they seem to be hitting a good stride, as I said, and a good wave of momentum at the moment. Liverpool are just in absolutely terrific form. They only drawn 1 league game out of the last 7 or 8, which was against Manchester City. Rightfully so, I suppose. And they have been hitting an absolute form. The last 3 games in the Premier League ended in clean sheets, which is a plus, really, when you think about it. You know, and then you have, of course, this game against Spurs, a side who have been on wobbly feet for a while, and now they're hitting a good form as well. You know, the last victory against Leicester was an absolute peach. The goals from Son were absolutely terrific as well. He's the man at the moment for Tottenham Hotspur. Son Heung-min, in a season where Kane isn't exactly shining as some people expected him to be. For City against Newcastle, I think it's a game that is straightforward. Newcastle do not exactly need the game. Their finish is great in the table. They're 10th. They turned things around absolutely tremendously with Eddie Howe, who's doing a tremendous job. The signing that they did in the transfer window did the trick for them and transformed their season 180 degree. For me, you know, I think City do not have to overthink this one now, because now they have a straightforward path. You win your 4 games in the league, and you are done, and you're really, you know, winning the league this season, and you don't have to worry about Liverpool at all. They're in the lead, they have a point of a lead, but we don't know after that elimination from the Champions League, maybe a certain moral side, a certain mental side would creep, you know, into it, and maybe will affect City's psyche. Maybe it will affect Guardiola somehow. Obviously, he will make changes, you assume that. You know, definitely he would want to rotate players for the last 4 games. He wants always a fresh squad and a deep squad, but maybe that will be costly. Who knows? We will just wait and see, of course. Elsewhere, of course, Arsenal facing Leeds United, another game where, you know, both sides need the points. Arsenal, of course, need them for the top 4 battle, maybe even to improve their position and go third if something happened with Chelsea and Wolverhampton. And Leeds United, they're trying to survive to escape the ghost of relegation. Of course, they're 2 points above Everton and 1 point ahead of 1 game ahead of them. Sorry, you know, on games played. Everton 33 games played and Leeds 34 games played. Leicester City, speaking of Everton, Leicester City are going to be hosting Everton, and Everton know really that every game they will play at the moment is, you know, a cup final basically that they will need to win to get, you know, to avoid relegation at the moment. Frank Lampard, you know, unfortunately for him, he's coming in a bad period, I think, for the club at the moment. He's really coming in a bad period at the moment. They lost 19 games this season, which is a bad record. This is a half of the season, literally. They're going to be losing by the end of it, and they seem not to be turning around. They seem to be not finding any solution at the moment to turn things around. Yes, they're having some great results, you know, beating Chelsea, beating United. They even had a good performance against Liverpool, for all I know, at Anfield, but certainly they need points from games like these. Leicester City are not the best as well, but, you know, still, you want to see them, you know, I mean, a side like Everton going down is going to be a big story, and it's going to be a disaster, I think, for the club, aside from the obvious income and revenue things. You know, PR and, you know, reputation-wise is going to be a big hit for that club as well. Probably the only fans who are going to be happy about this is going to be the Liverpool fans, as a sense of a rivalry. And the last game, of course, not technically, the last game is City and Newcastle United, but technically Norwich City versus West Ham United on Sunday. Norwich, just, you know, relegation confirmed for them, and West Ham, I think they look at the moment pretty safe in the knowledge that they're going to be 7th, because they don't seem that they will be getting any further, any higher on the table, because the gap is getting bigger at the moment. 9 points behind Spurs, 11 points behind Arsenal at 4th, so it's impossible really at the moment. And, you know, they just been eliminated from the Europa League semi-finals, so they have the league to focus on and try to finish in style. Though they had a good season, they just derailed at the end of it. So that's it for the games for the Premier League. Again, we're going to see a great weekend of action, of course, and the Premier League title race is still the hottest thing going, and we hope to see it go down to the wire. From the Premier League, we move on, of course, to Spain and La Liga, a league that seems to be pretty done and dusted at the moment. 3 games left, of course. Real Madrid officially won La Liga last week after beating Espanyol 4-0. You know, the battle for top 4 seems to be, I think, a clear cut. It looks like the 4 that will be playing Champions League football next season are clear. It's going to be Real Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, and Atletico Madrid. Maybe Atletico Madrid. We don't really know. You know, we'll see what is going to happen, of course, but the big focus is going to be On the derby, clearly, the big derby of Atletico Madrid versus Real Madrid, and the whole situation about the Guard of Honor that we're just going to talk about in a moment. But the match day starts with Levante Sociedad on Friday tonight on 8 p.m. A game where, Levante, I don't know, maybe they'll try and stage a big comeback, a big survival at the end. It doesn't look so, because they're 5 points away from Granada, who are 18th, not even 17th, and 6 points over Mallorca at the moment, and they don't seem to be heading anywhere up, but they're heading down to the second division in Spain. On Saturday, it starts with Mallorca versus Granada, Athletic Club versus Valencia, Cadiz versus Elche, Celta Vigo versus Deportivo Alaves, and Real Betis facing Barcelona. Big game for Real Betis, winners of the Copa del Rey, of course. Congratulations for them on that big achievement, particularly for Joaquin, who've been a senior player for that club for a while now. He's 41, and apparently he's going to be renewing the contract for 1 year. We're talking about the likes of Zlatan Ibrahimovic playing and extending their shelf life. We're talking about Ronaldo playing at 37. We're talking about these kind of players, but we don't talk about Joaquin enough, playing at 41 for Betis and giving it all for that club, and being a part of this this really good team of Real Betis, of course, winning the Copa del Rey against Valencia and the final. On Sunday, it will be Getafe versus Rayo Vallecano. Villarreal eliminated from the Champions League. A great run for them, really. Hats off for them and for Unai Emery against Sevilla, a side that could have done better with this season in terms of La Liga title race, but they shot themselves in the foot just too many times, and eventually they shot themselves in the head, figuratively speaking, of course, and they absolutely wasted an opportunity to even compete. We could have been talking about Sevilla competing now for the La Liga title with Real Madrid and being neck and neck and stuff like that. I mean, I remember a period where we were talking Sevilla win their games in hand, and they are over, and they go ahead of Real Madrid on the table, on the top of the table. At a certain point, they were top of the table, so it's crazy season for Sevilla. Great work for them, of course. As far as they're concerned, of course, they've been eliminated from the Europa League, the favourite competition, from the quarterfinal, and they've been really, average, I suppose, this season for them. But maybe next season, with a little bit more work from Julen Lopetegui, and maybe a little bit more consistency and belief, I suppose, because they didn't believe in themselves, even when they were neck and neck with Real Madrid, they didn't believe in themselves. So maybe with more belief, more work, couple of transfers maybe, and of course they will be probably prepped for a good title race. We hopefully to see them in a good title race, as well as Barcelona, of course, who face Real Betis, a season that, Barcelona, whose season have been going decently under Xavi. I mean, yes, they sort of got over the original, we got to the Champions League and played in the Europa League. For a moment, they looked like the favourites in the Europa League, but they were eliminated in horrific style, both on the pitch and in the stands, and of course, the situation with Frankfurt and the 30,000 fans that just invaded the stadium in the Camp Nou in that game against Eintracht Frankfurt. The loss, the scandals, the loss of belief all of a sudden in Xavi's project, and people were talking about sacking Xavi at certain points, and in certain corners of social media and the press. The media, certain corners of it, started attacking Xavi as well for his stubbornness, for his insistence on playing too much tiki-taka and adhering too much to the 4-3-3, although that was a criticism to Koeman as well. And even when he was trying to change formation and play 3-5-2 and what have you. Then you have the PK scandal. There's loads of things behind the scenes as well in Barcelona that seem to be not working for them. And amongst all the talks about signing the likes of Lewandowski or Salah or Haaland or Mbappe and these kind of things, it is lost in the middle of it how good and how improved Barcelona are at the moment compared to the certain points where they were down and out for that season, and nobody expected them to even be in the top 4 conversation in Spain. But now they're second, and they're pretty. I'm sure they're pretty secure in second, but maybe they finish 3rd or 4th. But again, at least they're guaranteed Champions League football next season, which is a big plus. But maybe it puts more pressure as well on Xavi himself. As you mentioned, Getafe Rayo Vallecano on Sunday, Villarreal Sevilla, Espanyol facing Osasuna. And of course the big game is going to be Atletico Madrid versus Real Madrid, the big derby. Atletico Madrid stole the show in the week by saying that they're not going to be making a Guard of Honor. Honestly, I agree with everyone said that this is not a big deal. I mean, if they didn't want to do it, fine. It's the absolute choice. If they wanted to do it, it's the absolute choice. It's a Guard of Honor. It's not a duty. It's not an obligation. I mean, this is like the bending the knee thing in the Premier League, isn't it? This is like bending the knee in the Premier League, where it is a good gesture, but the fact that it's repeated a lot and repeated in every game in the Premier League makes it feel like it is an obligation for the players to do so, and that's why when players refuse to bend the knee and take the knee, that's when criticism starts. Wilfried Zaha happened, was a part of that. Marcos Alonso, announced that he's not going to be bending the knee, but nobody really mentioned him. I mean, I'm not going to say the reasons, but you can figure out for yourself. So this is the same thing. This is the same sort of, not the same thing in terms of the sensitivity of the situation, but obviously the fact that Atletico Madrid refused to do so made it feel like this is a pretty, made them the villains, but in my opinion, they're not. They have the right to do the Guard of Honor if they wanted to, and people would point out, and I know people on social media would point out and say, but they did it to Barcelona quite a couple of times. Again, it's their freedom to do so. Whenever they want to and to whoever they want to, and Real Madrid board or administration or whatever shouldn't feel like kids and teenagers and start whining and complaining why Atletico Madrid didn't give them that Guard of Honor and really expect a pretty heavy atmosphere at the Wanda for that. So this game, I think, technically doesn't matter for Real Madrid, but obviously as a derby, it matters for them. They want to beat Atletico Madrid. They want to put the dagger into their season, and maybe, considering what could happen with Real Betis and Barcelona, maybe give Real Betis a chance to get into the Champions League spots. Who knows, really? We will wait and see. But obviously, I tried to stretch out what I'm talking about in La Liga because there's nothing really to talk about in La Liga after the league was settled for Real Madrid, of course, who have all of the eggs literally on the basket of the Champions League final on the 28th of May, of course, to look forward to. Going on to the Bundesliga, of course, and the weekend, the round 33, the penultimate round of the Bundesliga takes place on the weekend. Of course, it starts with Bochum-Bielefeld on Friday, a game where Bielefeld, of course, needs the point to keep themselves in the Bundesliga and to try and secure a place next season in the top flight. Of course, they've been on a good form recently. Bielefeld, they're not exactly the worst side in the Bundesliga when you think about it, but of course the last month of action and the last month and a half of action have been horrendous for them. If you look at it, 2 draws, 7 losses in the last 10 games. The last win goes back to February against Union Berlin, 1-0. Since then they haven't won a game, and the worst thing about this is they only scored 3 times in the same period. They only scored against Stuttgart in the 1-1 draw, 1 goal against Köln in the loss 3-1, and the draw against Bielefeld against Hertha Berlin just last week 1-1, which is even more problematic, I think, for Arminia Bielefeld when you think about it. On Saturday, the big games come in, of course. Hoffenheim versus Bayer Leverkusen, a game where both sides involved won the points for different reasons. Leverkusen want to keep their position on third place, at least that position. They want to keep it safe, for this season. They want to give the likes of Leipzig behind them any opportunity. Of course, of Freiburg in particular. Freiburg who are 4th at the moment, and we could be seeing them in the Champions League next season, which is going to be a real amazing achievement for Freiburg. Leverkusen 3rd. They want to keep their season safe. Of course, they can't be second. It doesn't look like they will be second anytime soon, unless Dortmund slip in these last 2 games, which is unlikely, really. Köln play Wolfsburg. Köln at the moment are 6th, and if they beat Wolfsburg, which I hope they do, they might even go 4th if the results go their way. So they might be even in for a Champions League place as late as this weekend. Of course, 1 place for the Europa League is left, of course, for the Bundesliga, because the other is going to be occupied by the winner of the DFB Pokal, which is going to be apparently going to be Union Berlin in the final with Freiburg. So Freiburg, speaking of them, they will be facing Union Berlin. A preview of that EP Pokal final for them, a game between two sides. That won European places. Freiburg won the Champions League to sort of cap off a great season for them, and Union Berlin won at least a Europa League place that is occupied now, or a Conference League place that is occupied now by Cologne. And speaking of Cologne, of course, Ilias Skiri, who have been adamant on this podcast that is the best player in Cologne this season, is linked with AC Milan, and these seem to be true and honest and very credible reports. Hopefully he goes there. If they win the Serie A and they will be in the Champions League next season, it is going to be quite the season for Ilias Skiri, who maybe should be now moving to the next level of football, because he's a really good midfielder and he's one of the best midfielders in the Bundesliga, and maybe he could move a little bit higher in the rankings, in European football. Freiburg, as I mentioned, versus Union Berlin, a game between sides that need the points for the top four and the European places in general. Greuther Fürth, relegated already, of course. They face Borussia Dortmund, who have nothing to play for after losing the Bundesliga, and losing their Klassiker, and of course they're going to be second. It seems like they're not going to be going any lower, but so maybe they will give some players a rest. But obviously thinking about next season, what would happen with or without Haaland, of course, after what happened. I mean, loads of changes probably going to be happening in the Haaland situation with his agent Mino Raiola passing away. Rest in peace for him. Hertha Berlin face Mainz, of course, on Saturday. The game that, one of those games where, Hertha needs the points really, because if you look at it, Hertha are 4 points above the relegation, so they don't want to slip this late into the season and go into even that playoff spot for against the side from Bundesliga 2. On Sunday, Eintracht Frankfurt versus Borussia Mönchengladbach. Mönchengladbach, 10-11th on the table. They don't care really about the league anymore, or where they finish in the league anymore, but Frankfurt, of course, have a bigger fish to fry when they think about the Europa League final against Rangers. Is going to be a really big field fight in Sevilla on the 25th of May about that Europa League final. Bayern Munich play Stuttgart, of course, on Sunday as well, and Bayern Munich, I think, need a whole separate video about what's gone wrong with their season. I'll talk about it. I will make it, hopefully. Maybe I'll make a whole episode specially to talk about Bayern Munich, which is really interesting, in my opinion, because there's a lot to dissect in Bayern Munich's season. The game itself doesn't matter really to me. I think Stuttgart need the point, yes, but Bayern Munich need to finish the season in style at least before the start of next season. Nusar Mazraoui is all but confirmed as the first signing of next season. Is going to be announced as a Bayern Munich player starting from next season in the next few hours. Next few days, if not even hours, as a Bayern Munich player, which is a big coup. I think he's a very versatile player, can play numerous positions, and that is that is another joker maybe that Bayern will need. He can play in the midfield, he can play on a right back, and that will allow us maybe to use Pavard as a centre back, or even if we add more players. If we add Gravenberch to the midfield, there's talks about Anthony, there's talks about Timber from Ajax. Seem to be that Bayern Munich going to be quite raiding Ajax this season after Erik ten Hag goes out of that club. And finally, of course, it's RB Leipzig versus Augsburg. Leipzig back to 5th after their loss last weekend in the Bundesliga. Of course, losing to Borussia Mönchengladbach, of all teams, really 3-1, which is a surprising result. And of course, couple that with an elimination of the Europa League, a loss before that to Union Berlin. It's a bad patch for Leipzig, yes, but I think they had enough of a good form and a turnaround actually from where they were at the start of the season that is good enough probably to give them a little bit of a credit and to give them some leniency when they have a couple of bad results like these. Domenico Tedesco has been doing a tremendous job with the club and he's been turning them around. Christopher Nkunku is an absolute machine and is probably the best player in form in the Bundesliga. Of course, he's on 18 goals this season. His assist tally as well is absolutely tremendous. He's the second behind Muller with 13 assists, so that is 31 contribution this season in the Bundesliga, not a bad number at all for Christoph Nkunku. He's a very sought after player at the moment. So it's a good season for Leipzig all in all, and definitely they want to end it in the best way possible. Hopefully we'll see, hopefully we'll see a good end to the season in the Bundesliga, and hopefully we see some competition next season. And as I promised, I will be making a special episode, maybe a short one about Bayern in the meanwhile, maybe after the season is over, to just cap it off nicely anyway. It is the Serie A, of course, to finish off the round, and it is now going down to the wire. Indeed, it is clear now that it is a two-horse race between AC Milan and Inter Milan for La Liga, for the Serie A title. Of course, Napoli are out of it, Juventus are very far, and at the moment, it seems that we're going to have, the top four, first of all, is pretty clear at the moment. It's Milan, Inter Milan, Napoli and Juve in the Champions League next season. You have Roma, Lazio, Europa League, and you have Fiorentina in the UEFA Conference League as well. They, Juve are playing in the Coppa Italia final, of course, against AC Milan. So, top four confirmed. So that those seven are going to be playing European football next season. Atalanta, maybe they will save at least a spot in the Conference League, who knows. Roma, by the way, congratulations for them qualifying on the UEFA Conference League final, and they're going to be facing Feyenoord Rotterdam in Tirana on the 23rd of May. So let's talk about Milan and Inter games, both in the same. We mentioned them at one, just like we did for Liverpool City. Inter Milan start the weekend on Friday facing Empoli, of course. It is a big game. The couple of games that left, or the 3 games left for Inter Milan this season, are big games. If we look at the calendar for both sides, I look at the schedule for both sides left. Inter Milan play Empoli now, then they play Cagliari in the next round, and they finish off by playing Sampdoria. Milan, on the other hand, they play Hellas Verona this weekend, and then they play Atalanta in the San Siro on the 15th of May, and they finish off by playing against Sassuolo away from home. That's quite the schedule for Milan. Inter Milan's schedule seems easier, but again, they slipped against Empoli before, they slipped against Sassuolo before, they lost games they shouldn't be losing. Inter, just as recently, they lost against Bologna away in the game that they said if they win, they're going to go top of the table. Of course, the game that was rescheduled from a couple of months ago, and now they find themselves 2 points behind Milan, and AC Milan are bound to make history now. After 11 years, they're going to be returning to Scudetto. They're going to be winning the Scudetto again, it seems. They can't slip in the last moments, can they? Everything looks so perfect at the moment for AC Milan. They look really, really ready to win that trophy, but Inter Milan still have things to do and still want to keep that trophy in their cabinet, of course, for the second season in a row. They want to create and want to start maybe a next era of domination in Serie A, who knows. But of course, a Serie A win for AC Milan is going to signify the return of that giant, the return of this Italian and European giant that has been sleeping for more than a decade at the moment. And it's definitely going to be an absolutely exciting moment to see AC Milan return into the fold of Italian football, on the top of Italian football. Maybe they're going to win a double, which is going to be a tremendous end to the season if you think about it, really. As you mentioned, Milan facing Hellas Verona away from home. It's a hard game. Hellas Verona are a side that could really give some headaches at the moment. They actually made it hard for them in the first leg. They won the last minute in the first game at San Siro back in October against Hellas Verona. So there's no guarantees that they will not make this hard for AC Milan, just like Empoli would be for Inter Milan, because they made it hard for them in the first fixture between the two sides back in October as well. They lost 2-0 barely, and after having a man sent off. It's going to be really, really tough for those two games, I think, even though Inter's game looks much easier. Empoli are 14th. They don't need the points. Maybe they will try and let the game go for Inter Milan. People would expect that to happen, but somehow I don't think it will happen anyway. Again, as I mentioned, the schedule seems easier for Inter Milan. maybe that will, that will create a false sense of security, and maybe they will lose one of those games. Who knows? Milan, at least they know that the games are hard, so they will prepare, and they will be in the mental state that they can't let any of those 3 games go anyway. So elsewhere in the Serie A, of course, Genoa play Juventus on Friday as well. Torino play Napoli, of course, considering that there is a final of the Serie A, of course. A final of the Coppa Italia, on Tuesday that will be played. That's why Inter Milan and Juventus they will be playing on Friday. Torino playing Napoli on Saturday. Sassuolo, Udinese, Lazio, Sampdoria on Saturday. Spezia, Atalanta on Sunday. Venezia, Bologna, Salernitana, who are doing really well at the moment. They're absolutely on a tremendous form, trying to make it into Serie A and survive. It's an absolute terrific patch of form they're in lately. Four wins out of the last 5. A draw against Atalanta away, where they could have won as well, and Atalanta saved in the last minute. 1 point ahead of Cagliari. Their opponents, if they win, they will be 4 points ahead of Cagliari, and that will give them a real sense of security in terms of staying in Serie A. Of course, they face Empoli next, and then they finish off by facing Udinese. So that's quite the schedule as well. When you think about it, it's a big battle as well between those 2 sides. Who's going to be the 3rd side, in my opinion, to relegate? Because Genoa and Venezia seem all but relegated to the Serie B. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, watching. Follow us on social media, of course, on Instagram and on Twitter. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates from all the content on the channel, all the videos, and of course, as I mentioned, subscribe to help us. We're on the way to 2K subscribers, and that's it. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.